All right, we have a very exciting podcast today. We have Thomas Hatsis on the podcast. He's been on here before, about like 20 episodes back, but he is the author of LSD The Wonder Child, the golden age of psychedelic research in the 1950s, which I just listened to as an audiobook, and it was awesome. If you haven't read it or listened to it, I highly recommend going and checking it out. Maybe go check out some of his other books like The Witch's Ointment, and I can't think of the other ones, but Tom, can you kind of what
Sure.
all have you written?
Sure. So the other two books are called, one's called Microdosing Magic, a psychedelic spell book, and that one's just on practical spell work to do with mushrooms. And the other is called Psychedelic Mystery Traditions, Spirit Plants, Magical Practices, Ecstatic States. And that one's just about, it's kind of like a prequel to The Witch's Ointment. It's just essentially psychedelia in the ancient Western and medieval Western world. So like, ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, that whole Thrace, that whole thing, and then medieval Europe.
Cool. Yeah, that's kind of a really, because I think you said in The Wonder Child, you were saying how you kind of got involved in like all the medieval stuff when you're walking around in Italy and whatnot.
Well, that's where it really, I guess it got its meat hooks in me, but I had been interested in The Witch's Ointment going as far back as I guess it was like 2002 or so, when I still have the book. I was gonna say I borrowed it, but 20 years, I guess it's mine now. I borrowed from a friend of mine, Richard Rudgley's The Alchemy of Culture. I think it's been reissued with it under a different name, but I don't recall the name that it's been reissued under. So sorry, Richard, I don't remember the name of the reissue.
Maybe he'll see this and he'll chime in.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Send an email.
Or if anyone out there knows it, please. Yeah, I can't think of it. Maybe it'll come to me as we talk.
That's right.
Or Essential Substances, I think it's called.
Okay, Essential Substances.
I think that's it, but I could be wrong. So don't quote me on that.
So what would you consider to be the alchemy of culture?
Well, I mean, depending on which culture we're talking about, I mean, alchemy is just the idea of just transmuting one thing to another. So, I mean, at least as far as the research I do, I think that there was a lot of like cultural alchemy going on with psychoactives, and you could see it in certain ancient pieces of art, like the famous Minoan opium goddess is a really good example. The Tassili caves of Algeria are also pretty noteworthy as far as showing mushrooms, or at least some people believe it that shows mushrooms. I could see that. I'm not totally sure, but maybe it does. But so the alchemy of culture would just be the way we sort of transmute culture. I think just how it shifts over time.
Okay. So like kind of how like one culture kind of folds into another one in a sense, or like how like in culture, within a cultural framework, how we kind of like change our ideas, or like how we transmute thoughts into like manifestations and stuff like that. Or
I would say both. I would say that the former, what you just said, the former would imply the latter. The former are all those small changes that we make as people, and then that affects the latter, which is the larger culture as a whole.
So do you believe, so like as a historian, I know that you probably see certain like cycles that kind of go around, or certain patterns in history. And like, so how would you say that history moves? Do you think it moves kind of like in a cycle, like in a cyclical pattern? Do you think it moves like in a spiral? Do you think it moves like, do you think it like increases or like decreases, like as far as like progress, as far as patterns? Do you think like we're seeing? Oh yeah.
It certainly increases, and you have to think of it like a web, like a spider web that goes out and out and out and out and out, and kind of hits into other spider webs as well. And in the sense that also, like if you look at a spider web from a distance, it all looks pretty uniform, right? But when you get up close to it, you see that it's not as uniform as you would think. And history is kind of like that. From a
Okay.
distance, things seem pretty uniform in history, but when you get up close, there are major differences, especially with things like psychedelic history, because um, people like to throw modern ideas onto the past. And
Yes.
when you do that with history, it's called an anachronism. And um, unfortunately, that happens a lot in psychedelic history. And when you actually get into the historical records and look up close, things are quite different than how we imagine them to be, because we're always rewriting history in our own likeness and image.
Yes, because a friend of mine, he was telling me, he's telling me that good always wins, quote unquote, good always wins. And then I was thinking, I think the winner always wins. And then the winner says that what they did was good.
Sometimes, yeah. Well, I mean, nobody thinks that what they're doing is the wrong thing. They all think
Yeah.
if you thought you were doing the wrong thing, you would change doing that thing,
Yeah.
right? To the right thing. So just some people have some pretty messed up ideas as to what they think the right thing is.
Yes.
Joseph
Yes, I would
Stalin
have to agree.
Easy example.
Yeah.
Low-hanging fruit of an example.
So you're saying something with in The Wonder Child about how they had like these stockpiles of like LSD in the Soviet Union or something like that.
Well, people thought they had
They
them.
thought they had them. Okay.
Yeah, and so they were. What happened was there was a miscalculation, and I'm not a math person, so
Okay.
I apologize that this isn't going to be very mathy. But what happened was somebody got wrong the difference between milligrams and like micrograms or something like that. Like they messed up a decimal point. And so when it appeared from these mistaken calculations that the Ruskies were stockpiling, enough LSD to dose every human being in the United States 10 times over. And so that's one of the things that lit the fire under the ass of the CIA. And they were like, oh, okay, we got to start doing the same thing and looking into LSD and testing it and gathering up as much of it as we can. And our government did do that. The CIA made a deal with Sandoz and to buy up all of their LSD.
Wow. It's kind of like it's almost as good as buying Alaska.
I'd rather have a lot of LSD than Alaska, personally. Although I hear Alaska's nice, it's just a little too cold for me. I'm not, I hear people like go on cruises in Alaska, and I'm sure it looks beautiful, but it's like there's just fucking icebergs. Like, I don't know. I'm more of a tropical kind of person.
Yeah, dude.
I guess.
No, I think my uncle went on a cruise in Alaska, and I'm thinking, a cruise in Alaska, why don't you just go like walk around the mountains or something? Why do you want to be around all the glaciers?
Yeah, I mean, you could rent a boat and just take it out in the or I don't know where you're located, but if you're near the water, just rent a boat and go out and freeze your balls off in the middle of January and do it that way.
Well, to his defense, though, I'm sure it'd be a lot less like it probably is. I think you told me that it's not kind of one of those cruises where you just go to basically get drunk. It's more like a cruise where you like go and you see a bunch of like polar bears and you fish and stuff, and like you see a bunch of really cool stuff. So I'm sure it'd actually be probably cooler than a tropical one, but except you like wouldn't. It just wouldn't the vibe, right?
Yeah, but so the tropical one, they have that one where it's like there's like those like pigs and hogs and shit that swim in the water.
Wait, where?
I don't remember where it is, but I'm sure if anyone in your audience, if you just Google island with swimming pigs, it'll come up. It should come up. I hope it comes up because it sounds awesome. Anyway, the point I'm getting at is there's plenty of wildlife in a nice tropical kind of setting instead of the cold.
Yeah. The cold, depressing wind.
Yeah.
But so let's transition here because I kind of started getting into Alaskan cruises.
Yeah.
But so like how I'm like reading through this, I guess listening through it, reading through it. I don't know. It was an awesome book. The Wonder Child I'm talking about, and it really kind of it. I think it's important that we start thinking about these things in a really objective, scientific way, especially as we kind of go into the future, because we want people to see hey, these things are helpful, these things are like at MAPS, like the things that they're doing at MAPS, like it's really helping people with PTSD, with marriages, stuff like that. And I think what you're doing with everything is great. So I just wanted to say that. But can we kind of rewind and let's how was LSD discovered? Or what's the history of even going back as far as the ergot, right? I mean, what's the history of that?
Sure.
When did that begin?
Yeah, ergot begins centuries ago. At least the first references we have to it come from Assyria, and also, but that they were talking about ergot, like ergotism and people being poisoned by it. When we get to around the 5th century before the Common Era, 4th, 5th century before the Common Era, and Hippocrates is writing about ergot used as a medicine. It helped women as they were giving birth. And by medieval times, you have reports of women teaching other women the secrets of witchcraft and occult secrets and stuff using ergot. And in the late 1800s, it just kind of exploded into different forms of medicine, too many to list here. That's how Albert Hofmann, the Swiss chemist who synthesized LSD, first came upon it. He was working with ergot at his lab. He was at Sandoz Pharmaceuticals, and he was trying to come up with a new migraine medicine, and ended up creating LSD.
And if that doesn't give you a migraine.
What's that?
Oh, nothing. So what, I guess, what is a psychedelic drug? What is LSD?
Wow. So some would say that a psychedelic is, see, this is getting into the sciencey brain and stuff, but some people would say that I think it's the GABA A receptor, but I could be wrong about that. Again, I don't know much about brain chemistry, but some people, say a psychedelic is anything that works on a specific, function or area of the brain. I see psychedelic more as the way Humphrey Osmond meant when he coined it, from two Greek words, suke and delene, meaning mind manifesting. So for me, anything that's mind manifesting, I think can be considered psychedelic, or any kind of plant or fungus that's mind manifest. So I'm one of the people that I consider cannabis a psychedelic. Some people don't. Some people, consider it psychoactive or an intoxicant or something. But I've gotten into some pretty interesting places with cannabis. Definitely when I mix it with witchcraft. Sorry, I'm just a little warm in here. And so I don't know, for me, it's pretty psychedelic. And if you were to eat 5 grams of hash, you would probably think it's psychedelic too, because I guess it's what I'm trying to say is that cannabis is one of the few things that we microdose, and we kind of see it as a macrodose. When we smoke a bowl or a joint or a blunt or a bong, that's only a microdose of what cannabis can actually do. When you take more of it, again, in a form of hash or something, or as edibles or potions that I make, you get into some really psychedelic states of awareness. So to me, that's, cannabis could be psychedelic. I work with henbane and belladonna, and they are, some people would say, highly psychoactive. I would say they are entheogenic, because I use them for spiritual practices. So it's odd because different people define things. I get in trouble all the time because people, they don't define psychedelic the way I do by and large. So, but yeah, that's how I do it.
Well, I mean, even if you drink a powerful energy drink, like a Bang energy drink or something, you get like just some crazy thoughts. I mean, you'll be just like just walking around and you'll be vibing with like this, like, oh, like, because like when I drink one of those, like, or when I drink a lot of coffee, like I'll just, my mind will just like explode like outward, and then I'll just be creating all these webs of ideas and thoughts, and I'll be all like intertwining, and then I'll just like, I won't even be able to write them down because it's just moving so fast, right?
Yeah, see, cannabis does that for me. I've never, I had one energy drink once a long time ago, about the same time 20 years ago, and I was borrowing my friend's book, The Alchemy of Culture, because I was in college, and I drank a Red Bull, and it did not give me wings, as that they say in the advertisements. It just made me really depressed. And like, I remember I had my Spanish finals the next day, and I'm like, I got to stay up. And it just made me really depressed, and I couldn't study at all. And then I ended up passing Spanish. It was fine. I did fine on the test, but that was the last time I ever took an energy drink. So, but yeah, I mean, if it gets you, like, again, especially when you couple things like that with magical techniques or like witchy techniques, I think that, like, you're unlocking parts of your brain that mesh well with these kinds of substances. And yeah, an energy drink could work just as well. I mean, if it works for you, that's what works.
So so what is like this, so like what is witchcraft, what is magic, at least like to you?
Well, so again, there let's see. Traditionally, witchcraft is seen as Aristotelian, whereas magic is seen as Neoplatonic. What that weirdness means is that witchcraft works with elements, earth, water, fire, air, Aristotelian principles of the elements, whereas magic sees things in a more Neoplatonist hierarchy of beings, like everything from an insect to an angel, everything in between that. And this actually gets back into alchemy, and the idea is with magic is to just become a better version of yourself by, like transmuting yourself into some kind of higher being, whatever that might be or look like to somebody. My practices are a little bit of mix of both, because I get down with the elements, and I do also believe in a hierarchy of beings.
Okay, so it's almost like you're, at least in my own conceptualization, what you just said to me, it's kind of a, like you're kind of transmuting your mind into a certain will state, where you can like get to the feeling where you're like better than what you were before, in a sense.
Not just the feeling, but actually like getting better, like doing the deep work.
Yeah.
And, working on yourself. And that's, one of the things that, specifically, I think mushrooms help with a lot, is just working on the self. So.
Yeah, I definitely believe in the future, that's what's, I mean, all these psychedelics, and especially what they're doing with maps, at maps. I'm not sure if you're familiar with maps at all, but
I'm familiar with maps, yes.
Okay. Just like what they're doing there is just like so, it just blows my mind. I think it's amazing. So
yeah, there's a lot of organizations out there doing a lot of good work. The Hefter, what was it? The Hefter Institute is another one.
Okay.
Chacruna Institute, although they just put out one of those dreadful mushroom and Christian art bullshit like meme things, and kind of sucks, because they're a credible institution, but I think sometimes like credible institutions like don't check as much as they should with things. In this case, they didn't. Or like there's Symposia, who's not credible at all, and they don't really check anything. But yeah, but MAPS is a good one.
Well, I think the trend in like pharmacology today is that they want to treat people instead of curing them. I think that's especially a thing in mental health, is that, I mean, I was kind of thinking like as far as, okay, if someone's going to therapy every week for 40 years. Is the therapy working? And like, sure, like I've heard the argument, like people have to keep going to therapy, like in order to, like, like feel better, because, like it's just who they are, that's how their body works, how their mind works. But, my other big things is that, well, if they're going there once a week for 40 years and they still like can't go without it, then are they cured, or like is this like treatment really helping them? And I kind of think that same way with like with giving people antidepressants, and then they just take antidepressants their whole life until they're gone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard because for some people that are going and seeing a therapist for 40 years or whatever every week, it could be a lot worse for them if they don't, so it might be helping in a way that it's like, oh, well, this person would be like crippled, just mentally and emotionally if they didn't go. And so there's that way of looking at it, of course, and there's also the way of looking at it of like, well, I think it all gets down to the individual level, because some therapists are really good and they care, and perhaps others not so much.
Well, it's also enjoyable to go to therapy. I mean, I've gone to therapy and it is enjoyable to go. So, I mean, if it was free, I mean, I'd keep going, because in college it was included with my tuition. So
sure. Yeah, I try to, like, I've found that like I play in a band, and like screaming into a microphone is by and large all the therapy that I require at this point in my life, which is nice.
Yeah.
And I felt like, before I got my band together, that I was actually, like, oh, I should see a therapist. And also I've been doing a lot more shadow work recently, and I think that helps. And I try to, like you were saying, it's like, treating the person. What I've been trying to do is treat myself, not in like a treat yourself way, but I mean like in a,
Yeah.
a mentally, healthy, treat myself way. And, by just doing magic, eating mushrooms, playing music, doing shadow work, especially creating art, but again, because that works for me. For some people, they need the therapist of once a week for 40 years, and God bless them. I hope that it's helping no matter what, that's at least the hope. As long as, we're all rooting for each other to just be doing better the next day, if possible. That's a good baseline for society. We all need to root for each other a little bit more.
I 100% agree. I think whatever, like you do you, but like, like as a concept, I think it's good to think about these things. But so when you're talking about shadow work, are you talking about like Carl Jung?
Well, I mean, you can't really talk about shadow work without talking about Carl Jung. So just getting in touch with, look, we're all human. We all came from the dirt. We all came from the dirt through a slow, creative, evolutionary process that put us through the minds of one-celled organisms and reptilian beings, and, well, not reptilian like the conspiracy, I mean like reptiles and shit, like the reptilian brain, up through the small little mammals, up through apes, up through advanced, and finally so on and so forth, getting to us. So that's a lot of shit to be carrying around. And it's all stored in our cellular, like, just map, so to speak. And so shadow work is, it's getting back into the, the lizard brain, the reptilian brain, the animalistic mind, the part that is all desire and all passion and just like unbridled, like the human soul completely unhinged. But obviously we're trying to live in a civilization, so we can't walk around being fucking unhinged. So, you go to prison for stuff like that sometimes. So you do shadow work to just kind of balance out and get in touch with that. And just, I like to think of it as kind of like, getting in and like petting your reptilian mind, your lizard brain just like, that's okay, it's okay, things are fine. So that's how I see it. Carl Jung had a much better way of explaining all that than I just did. So if anyone's interested, check him out.
Yeah, no, I just read the Undiscovered Self.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so he kind of talks about it. It really relates to you and like what you talked about in The Wonder Child, because he was talking about the difference between knowledge and understanding, and then he also kind of went into religion and how you kind of need a sort of like religious experience in order to escape the control of outside forces like government. Because he said that without religion, people are vulnerable to making the government become their religion, right? And then
Yeah, that the whole French Revolution. That's why it completely failed. I mean, it's not to get political, but the reason ours succeeded was because with our revolution, excuse me, we said we're endowed by our creator, that our rights go back, are beyond human rights, beyond the state. Whereas the French said, no, your rights are an extension and a sort of a guarantee of the state, so long as we continue to guarantee it. And that'll always fall apart because, again, the human soul yearns for something more. Even atheists, I think, feel that there's, they might not call it God or Gaia or Yahweh or Allah or whatever.
The Big Bang.
Or Shiva.
And progress. Well, the Big Bang and progress. I mean, that's kind of the.
Well, but the Big Bang is weird because, like, for so long, the atheist argument was that, the universe was just eternal. And it was actually the spiritual people saying, oh, no, there was something that kicked it all into gear. And I mean, most of the time, scientific arguments beat out spiritual arguments. But on the most important question, how did this all happen? The spiritual argument actually wins out.
Well, that's because it's impossible to know. I mean, you can't.
Sure, but we do know that it all reduced down to something. Like, we do know that, like, it wasn't always here, and we know that because the universe is still expanding. That was it the red light shift of I forget the name of the scientist who discovered it.
Yeah, I forget what they're called, but like red shifts. Yeah, like when because like light waves,
radiation afterglow. The radiation afterglow from the initial explosion of the Big Bang. So again, I'm just saying that that's something where the material reductionists in an odd way got it wrong. Well, they're right because it does all reduce to that, but they were wrong in saying that the universe was eternal.
Yeah, no. So also another interesting thing about that is that, like, that's only how far we can see back, right? Like, we don't know if there was something that like came before that and it all condensed down and like it's a cycle. Or I mean, we're not astrophysicists, but
oh sure, but we could still talk about it. I mean, like, there's what you're referring to is it's called multiple bubble universes, and that's like just like it's just one explosion after another, after another, after another. And of course, we don't know. There's no way to know that either. Lawrence Krauss's recent book, Universe from Nothing, also doesn't work because he sets up this quantum foam from which everything sprang. It's like, well, that's something.
Yeah. I mean, there can't really be. Well, I mean, my thing with nothingness is that nothingness is kind of this thing that you can't really describe, and you can't really know anything about it because nothing is nothing. It's completely unknowable. Like, even black space is still something, right?
Yeah. Well, Aristotle had a great definition of nothing. He said, nothing is what rocks dream about.
yeah, exactly. That just sums it all up. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's things that you can't, like, we're all human beings and we're inside of these minds. Like, we all live kind of in our own world. But like, at the end of the day, like, we can't really like know for certain like everything about the world. And and you kind of like need this thing inside of you to tell you like, Greg, like I'm based in this realm, and I'm not going to let like these outside forces push me away from that ideal or those ideas. While like maybe like, you know, having an open mind is important. I'm just saying it's important to like think for yourself.
Of course. Well, we like to say the magician remains steady between the polarities.
Can you,
so as everything is going crazy, the magician is right here.
yeah,
Right here, focused, control of the mind, control of the soul, control of the body, watching everything go crazy. But that's when the magician goes to work, is when everything around is going chaotic, because magic is, I mean, the simplest definition is like the whole world, the whole universe is filled with energies. These energies are just chaotic, bouncing all over the place. Magic, witchcraft, any kind of contemplative, you know, esoteric practice is the ability to direct those energies as best you can. And they're heavy and they're fast and they're fucking crazy. So it's hard to catch it and, you know, transmute it into something else. But every now and then it happens, and it's really cool when it does, and you kind of make something happen.
So when you go and you write a book and you say like, hey, like I'm going to start writing this, does that kind of keep you centered in a sense, like, hey, like I'm going to write The Wonder Child, you know, all this chaos is going on around me, but this thing is kind of centering me through?
Well, what it is I have a trinity, not like the Trinity from a, you know, the Christian church, but a different kind of trinity that I think a lot of people kind of work with, and that's just the trinity of mind, body, and soul. And so I take care of my body through exercise and just eating right. I take care of my soul through witchcraft and mushrooms. And to answer your question, I take care of my mind through writing books. And so when I'm writing a book, I'm doing a lot of other magic around it. As far as, you know, just eating right and eating mushrooms and talking to Gaia or Ikate, or, you know.
Cool. And as you were writing this, so like the MK Ultra stuff, I mean, that stuff is obviously, it's always been crazy. I mean, you like hear about it and it's just like totally insane. But I think you did a good job on kind of like adding in just like all the more finer details. But could you kind of explain like what it was?
Sure. So MK Ultra, earlier when we were talking about how the United States thought that the Soviets, through a miscalculation, was stockpiling LSD. Well, the CIA program that the United States put together was called MK Ultra, or I should say the CIA put together. It was a sub group. It grew out of earlier projects like Operation Bluebird, which was how the American government originally discovered mescaline over in Germany right after World War II. And so MK Ultra was, our government's desperate attempts to try to turn LSD into a weapon, and they simply couldn't do it. I mean, the only way you could really make LSD a weapon would be by mentally torturing a person. That's about it. But like, it can't, like they wanted to get it to like, let's say during war, we capture, one of the enemy. They tried to use LSD. Oh, let's see if we could get the enemy to, spill secrets or whatnot. Then when that didn't work, they said, all right, well, what if we used LSD as kind of like a mental cyanide capsule, where like if one of our soldiers gets captured by the enemy, they take the LSD and then everything they say is just going to be incoherent babbling, right? So the enemy's not going to be able to get any information out of them. And I mean, really all this goes to show is how little our government understood LSD. First, they're like, hey, let's use it to get their guys to talk. Shit, that's not working. All right, maybe we could use it to stop our guys from talking. Shit, this isn't working, I think it didn't work because, these medicine, their proper place is in, the therapeutic setting and in spiritual settings, churches and such.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you. And kind of just as like a mind expanding sort of deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is. There has never been a more direct way to access the deepest mysteries of your life and this existence than through things like mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca. I mean, ibogaine, like, they work. they work really well. So
Yeah.
it's good to see that they're finally getting their day in the sun again. In some areas like where I am. I'm in Oregon, and we just decriminalized everything in the whole state and legalized psilocybin for therapy, at least in the city of Portland.
Wow. That's awesome. I mean, I live in Idaho, so totally
You're not too
opposite.
far. I'll meet you at the border. We'll do it on my side, so it'll be totally decriminalized.
Sounds good, man. So I know you talked about Midnight Paperclip, or not Midnight Paper. I was mixing Midnight Climax and Operation Paperclip. So first, like, what was Paperclip? Because I kind of, when I was listening to it, I kind of got like, okay, well, Paperclip, kind of confused.
Yeah, I don't get too deep into Paperclip, so I could unpack it a little more now.
Yeah.
So Project Paperclip was just a secret operation to sort of vet various Nazi scientists to see who would work well over in our labs. And it was called Project Paperclip because I think it was their rap sheet was paper clipped to their resumes.
Okay.
So they wanted to know what they could do and what they could potentially do. And so Paperclip essentially, like, there were certain Nazi doctors, like Werner von Buren is one of them. Who should have been tried at Nuremberg, but because of things like Paperclip, was kind of very safely and secretly curried to the United States to work at, I believe, NASA.
And was that before the end of World War II, or?
Oh no, this was after World War II. When they were doing the Nuremberg trials, this guy should have been tried. I mean, by all accounts, he was a real son of a bitch, so he should have been tried for war crimes.
Okay, you can call Nazis motherfuckers all you want.
Awesome.
I think that's 100% approved. Yeah, that's kind of, I'm just trying to watch my language in general, that's all. Yeah, honestly, I do think that watching your language in general, I feel like it does make you feel like, I do feel better when I curse less.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so ingrained in me being Italian from New York. It's, fuck this, fuck that, shit this, so I'm just trying to tone it down a little bit.
It's like, oh shit.
But yeah, but Nazis are definitely motherfuckers. That's
yeah. Wait, so you're Italian?
Yeah, Italian and Greek.
Oh, and that's why you went to Italy. That's cool.
Well, I went to Italy because a friend of mine was getting an apartment there, and so it was just like, okay, and I would let it's Italy, it's gorgeous, Yeah. So it's like
cool. So what was your most, I want to say, like, what was your most transcendental experience in Italy? No, it's kind of a weird question, but like, I know, like, people go on trips and then they have these experiences on their trips where, like, whoa, real eye-opening,
So yeah, I was living there. I wasn't like backpacking and doing that. Like, I had an apartment and lived there and worked and did that whole thing. So it was a little different for me. But as far as like transcendent experiences, on certain nights, on like a nice warm night, I would just get on my bike and ride around Milano with a joint. And I mean, it's an ancient city and it just completely shuts down. I don't remember
Yeah.
what time, like 10, midnight or whatever. And so it's just like this, like there's nobody out. Like,
Wow.
here, in most cities, like, yeah, in the middle of the night, maybe you'll see one or two, like, yeah, obviously the streets aren't bustling anymore, but maybe there's a person. No, in Milano, nothing, nobody. So I would just get really high and ride my bike around the city, and this just ancient, beautiful city, and it was just cool. It was really awesome. There was this market. It was a monthly thing. It was right in this parking lot, right down the block from my apartment, where all these people from all over Europe would show up with all of their, like, wares and stuff, and just the most amazing stuff you could ever imagine, like, would show up at this little market. It was so cool. Not that that was transcendent, but
Yeah, but it's like it's different. It's kind of, I mean, just going to a place that you've just never been before can be a really amazing
oh yeah,
experience. Because like you kind of
yeah,
feel
there
like a
was,
kid
oh
again. So
dude, there was this chair made completely out of like these gigantic antlers and fur. I mean, it looked like something that,
oh
like,
wow.
like Odin would sit in. Like, the coolest, it was huge, just this chair, this gigantic chair of just all antlers and fur. And it was just like, what the fuck? It was the coolest. I'd never seen anything like it in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really cool. Going to punk shows in Italy was really cool because they all sing in English, and they all did like 1980s punk rock, like, because
Yeah.
it takes a while for our stuff to get over there. Um, like there are certain parts, like in like Eastern Europe, like, where they're just now getting into new metal. I don't know if you know that genre at all.
I I'm unfamiliar with new metal.
Like Corn, Limp Bizkit,
Oh, okay. Okay.
Orgy, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Deftones, yeah, they're just getting into that now in like Eastern Europe, and this is
Oh
like
wow.
20 years old, 20, 25 years old. Yeah,
Yeah, I love Limp Bizkit.
yeah. Their first album was really good.
I'm
The
trying to
second
think.
one was pretty good.
I just like know the name of this, like the artist, but I can't think of any of their songs unless like I heard them
Oh yeah,
and then I'd remember. But it's like, but yeah, I remember like listening to them in high school when I was working out and stuff. But
oh yeah.
um, so what do you play?
I play guitar and I sing.
And you sing? Wow, that's awesome.
We
When
got a
did
show
you?
coming up. Yay! What?
Is that tonight? Is that the open mic?
No, this is I run a psychedelic nonprofit as well.
Okay. Wow.
And yeah, my partner and I run it, and part of our services to the public is running a weekly open mic.
Wow.
It's a cannabis friendly, beer friendly, food friendly, and just regular friendly mic. So people show up, we pass joints around, and it's a good time. Play some music, hear some comedy, and it's an anything goes open mic. So whatever, your thing is, you got 7 minutes on stage to do it.
Wow, that's cool. And then your partner is doing it with you?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's kind of like a dual. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, she's a co-director of the psychedelic org. Like, she and I, we do everything together. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
So do you think as far as do you think psychedelics kind of help people like get a better connection with like other people, or like maybe like a better connection with themselves, which then springs out to other people? Or do you think how does its relation go with connection, do you think, in general?
All of the above.
Okay.
Yeah, every which way. The thing that we learned from the 1950s, and one of the things that I tried to get across with Wonder Child, was that psychedelics are not magic bullets. They're not, you're not just going to eat mushrooms or take LSD and be like, holy shit, you know, I'm a better person now.
Exactly.
There's a lot of internal work and integration you have to do. That's one of the reasons I wrote Microdosing Magic, was to show, you know, just some kind of like the weird witchy things you could do with this stuff to kind of just get your creativity flowing, start using your brain in new ways, just seeing the world differently. And psychedelics certainly do help with that. And then, at least in my life, they've certainly helped me form a better relationship with myself, which for some of us is the most difficult relationship, but it does totally expand outward towards other people. Although I've always been, respecting other people has never been a problem for me. It's been respecting myself that I've had difficulty with. And that's one of the things that psychedelic, especially mushrooms, but again, and it's not just the mushrooms, it's the witchy, you know, the weird witchy goddess worshiping practices that I do with them, and the shadow work that I do with them. That's what does it. It's not just the substance itself.
Yeah, it's kind of the routine that you have that kind of works for you as you go into it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, taking just like mushrooms by themselves is like, just like the old saying goes, it's like being up the creek without a paddle. Whereas if you're doing magical techniques or witchy kind of spiritual practices, or any kind of meditation, yoga, any kind of contemplative practice, you get that paddle, and now you can actually row and explore the waters, you know?
So you've seen Spider-Man, right?
Which one?
Any of them?
Yeah. I saw the first one, and I maybe the first two with Tobey Maguire. And I watched the cartoon as a kid, but I don't know, like, I don't know which ones you're talking about.
Well, I mean, with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, right? Of course, Uncle Ben. With great power comes great
yeah,
exactly.
Because, well, I mean, when you when they first made MDMA, you know, it was supposed to be, well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's supposed to be used for therapeutic uses. But then the party scene got a hold of it. And
I think it started off as an appetite suppressant, and yeah, and then it got into the party scene, and then people were like, oh, you could use this for therapy. I think that, I don't know much about MDMA, but you're on the right track. It either went from an appetite suppressant to therapy to club drug, or it went from appetite suppressant to club drug, which makes way more sense, because like the first time I took ecstasy, I wasn't like, oh, I want to go to therapy. I was like, yo, where is the party? Like, I want to get down. Like, I want to be dancing on tabletops and taking all my clothes off right now, you know? Yeah. So that's just my experience with it. But I would imagine that it went that way, I think.
Yeah. No, it makes 100% sense. I mean, I'm just thinking, like, as far as like, if you have a gun, right? Like, you need to be responsible with a gun, because guns can kill people, right?
Absolutely.
You need to be responsible with any. Yeah, you need to like be responsible with anything that's that can harm you or other people, and that includes. Well, I mean, you know, like everything. I think everything with moderation, but also everything with good thought and good intentions.
Care.
Yeah, with good care, right?
And you know what never gets brought up in that conversation, man? The internet. The most powerfully destructive. The internet can take down societies in a way that would make a nuclear missile jealous.
Yeah.
And we are so not careful with it. I've been kind of getting better about being careful with it, staying off social media as much as I can, because that's just bad news. It's just hard because, you know, when you use it to promote yourself, like your podcast, I'm sure, you know. Excuse me, it's difficult because it is a tool that we both find very useful and necessary, really. But at the same time, like, so what I try to do now is I post my shit and I just get right off, and that's that.
Dude, I post my shit, then I delete the app.
I don't even have the app on my phone. I don't have, this is funny. My friend got a kick out of this. So these are the apps on my phone. Okay.
Nice,
Nothing.
dude.
That's it. I'm not a phone person. I guess it's different from my generation to you. No, it's not, because people in my age are fucking obsessed with their phones. So it's not a generation thing.
Yeah, I mean, my parents, my grandparents, I mean, they're more obsessed with their phones than I am.
Yeah.
It's, well, I mean, like, because we grew up with them, so like we know that like they're not, like this
Well, I
thing
didn't
in our
grow up with
pocket
them.
is,
I
but
didn't grow up with phones.
like my generation did, and like
Yours
we
did,
know, like we know that like these things are like destructive because we've just like always been around them, so we've always known how to like, or like we had to learn over time, like, oh wait, like this thing's actually like basically cocaine. I mean,
Yeah.
um
I would say it's even worse than cocaine. I'd say that it actually makes people bigger assholes than cocaine does. And that's saying a lot, because cocaine makes people douchebags. I don't know if you've ever been around any cokeheads, but oh, they're the worst.
oh, I have. I have, yeah. But yeah, I think like with anything, it requires responsibility.
Sure.
And I think as far as like sometimes you also need good role models. And I know you talked a lot about Maria Sabina in there.
Mm-hmm.
Did I get her name correct?
Yeah, Maria Sabina.
Maria Sabina. And I do kind of want to clarify some things.
Sure.
Because I realized that her name is the same name as Aldous Huxley's wife.
Yep.
So so there are some parts in that where I was getting really confused. She never went to America, right?
No.
Or, okay.
Yeah, anytime I'm talking about Huxley, Maria Huxley, I'm talking about Maria Huxley. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of. But could you kind of explain like her role in everything?
Maria Sabina or Maria Huxley, because they're both very important.
Maria Sabina. And then if we have time, maybe Maria Huxley.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny because I'm giving a talk at some point. It's actually called A Tale of Two Marias, and it's going to be about Maria.
No way.
Yeah, I'm not even kidding. So, like, that's cool that you picked up on that.
Well, here's your rehearsal.
What's that?
Here's your rehearsal.
Here's my rehearsal. All right. So this will be the abridged version. So Maria Sabina was a Oaxacan medicine woman, a curandera, as they're called. And she very famously gave mushrooms to a guy named, a couple, Valentina and Robert Wasson, and their daughter, and Masha is her name, and a photographer named Alan Richardson. And this was in 1956, 57, somewhere, I forget the exact. But it was either 50s, 50s. It became very popular, and all of a sudden, all of these people knew that there was a Oaxacan curandera still serving mushrooms and still using these magic mushrooms, as people had for thousands of years. And so it became like today we talk about psychedelic tourism. This was like the first. Maria Sabina's home in Oaxaca, in Ayutla de Jimenez, was the original psychedelic tourist destination. And unfortunately, people weren't very kind, and they ended up trashing her little village and her home. And so she pretty much got Western peoples interested in psilocybin mushrooms again after,
Wow.
there was a cultural lapse. Again, we talked about, this alchemy of culture, how it changed. It's a web, in the early 1600s, people were using these mushrooms to turn into werewolves. And then all of a sudden we don't hear about it. And then we hear about it again, in Oaxaca, Mexico in the 1950s. And Maria Sabina is using them not to turn into a werewolf, but to cure people.
Yeah. Although I'm sure they could turn you into a werewolf as well if used irresponsibly, right?
Well, it's funny because Aldous Huxley's oh, which one was his son? I think it was Julian. Um, went to Haiti, and he gave LSD to a voodoo priestess, and he didn't give her too much. He gave her a small amount. And he said, "Oh, would you think about that?" She said, "That's really cool, but I got to be careful because if I take any more than the amount you gave me, I'll probably turn into a werewolf."
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking like, oh, giving that stuff to a voodoo like person, no bueno.
No, no bueno.
Cool, man. So what about
Or maybe it could be bueno.
yeah, I mean, who knows? I guess we'd have to see, right?
Well, it depends on what the person wants to do with it. I mean, you could do some really, evil magic with this stuff, or you could do good magic with it.
Yeah,
I tend to do the good magic stuff, but I know some people that do some pretty, I don't know, malefic magic, we'll say, with this stuff as well.
So, how much time do you have?
Not too much longer because I still got to load up the car with all the amps and everything.
All right. So, so kind of, I just bought Doors of Perception. I haven't read it yet.
You just bought what?
Doors of Perception.
Oh, nice.
And it came with Heaven and Hell, but I'll shoot you an email once I read it. But I was kind of wondering, so like, what was Maria Huxley's, or I don't know if she took his last name, but
She did.
okay, what was her role in everything?
So she has a mighty big contribution. I feel bad. So if you haven't read Heaven and Hell yet, I mean, if you haven't read The Doors of Perception yet, I don't want to spoil it for you because
it's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
so
fine.
For anybody out there that hasn't read The Doors of Perception, spoiler alert. So what was really cool that Maria Huxley did was she recognized the spiritual potential of mescaline, while both her husband Aldous and the Canadian psychiatrist Humphrey Osmond, who coined the word psychedelic, they were talking about mescaline in clinical terms, all very boring.
Yeah.
And it's Maria Huxley who says to, I was about to say famously, but it's not, it should be more famous that she did this because she completely changed the paradigm. She flipped the script, as they say. Excuse me, I just need a little water. Sorry. So while Humphrey Osmond and Aldous Huxley are talking all clinical, Maria Huxley says, well, wait a minute, fuck all that. Or, sorry, forget all that. I'm trying. So Maria Huxley says, forget all that. And she says, what if instead of all this clinical talk, you focused on the clear light, from the Tibetan Book of the Dead? Like, what if you focused on something spiritual instead? And that, in my opinion, is what clicked the entheogenic or spiritual experience with psychedelics in Aldous Huxley, which encouraged him to write the Doors of Perception in the first place. And so I feel like if the whole conversation would have stayed clinical, Huxley probably never would have written that book. But because Maria Huxley had the foresight to say, oh, this isn't a clinical thing, this is a spiritual tool.
Yeah.
That was a great moment in the Alchemy of Culture. She completely flipped the script around. And, we in the West were able to, relearn and, once again, tap into those deep spiritual truths available through psychedelics.
Damn.
Tale of two Marias.
Yeah.
Very important to very important people in the psychedelic renaissance.
Extremely important. And I think I feel like you're kind of an important figure in this kind of new renaissance as well. So
I appreciate that. I don't think I'm there yet, but but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hey, dude, I mean, any amount of energy that you put into it, I mean, we're all part of this colossal conglomerate of minds that are kind of just going about it. So
Sure.
I think we'll leave it off there.
Okay. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you again, man. And
That
anytime.
was awesome. And I really enjoyed your book. And I think anyone out there, go check out The Wonder Child. And also go check out his other books. Tom has some amazing thoughts, and he's done a large, hefty amount of arduous research on all these topics. So thank you for listening.
Thanks for having me, man.